Before we begin, please subscribe and click like, and tell me, from which city or country are you listening? The carriage wheels crunched over gravel as Penelope Whitmore clutched her father's worn leather journal to her chest, willing herself not to cry. Through the rain-streaked window, Ashworth Estate rose before her like a monument to everything she'd lost. 3 stories of honey-coloured stone, mullioned windows gleaming in the late afternoon light, manicured gardens stretching toward distant woods. 6 months ago, she might have arrived here as a guest, wearing silk instead of this threadbare morning dress with its carefully mended sleeves. 6 months ago, her father had been alive. The carriage door opened, and a footman extended his hand with barely concealed disdain. Penelope stepped down onto wet gravel, clutching her single small trunk that contained everything she owned. 3 dresses, 2 nightgowns, her mother's pearl earrings, and books. Always books. Penelope. Her Aunt Constance appeared in the doorway, resplendent in burgundy silk that probably cost more than Penelope's father had earned in a year. "You're late. The roads were muddy, Aunt. I apologize." "Yes, well." Aunt Constance's eyes swept over Penelope's appearance with obvious disapproval. "You look dreadful. I suppose it can't be helped. Come inside before the neighbors see you standing about like a beggar." The entrance hall was everything Penelope remembered from childhood visits: marble floors, a sweeping staircase, oil paintings of stern Ashworth ancestors glaring down from gilt frames. But now she saw it differently. Now she was not a guest, but a dependent, here on sufferance because she had nowhere else to go. "Mama, is this her?" A musical voice echoed from the staircase. Lady Beatrice Ashworth descended like a vision in pale blue muslin, golden ringlets perfectly arranged, her gown cut in the latest fashion. Behind her came her sister Cordelia, equally lovely in rose silk. "Girls, you remember your cousin Penelope?" "Oh my." Beatrice's blue eyes widened with theatrical sympathy as she took in Penelope's appearance. "My dear cousin, that dress is, well, it's certainly very black." "I'm in mourning," Penelope said quietly. "Of course you are. How terribly sad." Cordelia circled Penelope like a cat examining a mouse. "And that fabric, is it wool? How practical. Though it does seem a bit worn at the elbows, doesn't it, Bea?" "Tragedy often affects one's wardrobe," Beatrice said with false sweetness. "We must be charitable." Aunt Constance cleared her throat. "Mrs. Henderson will show you to your room, Penelope. You'll take the blue room in the east wing." "Actually, Mama," Cordelia interrupted, "we've converted the blue room into my new dressing room. Perhaps Penelope would be more comfortable in the small room near the servants' quarters. It's quite cozy." The small room near the servants' quarters turned out to be exactly that. A cramped space with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a window that overlooked the kitchen yard. Penelope sat on the hard mattress and finally allowed herself to cry. That evening she was summoned to dinner. The footman who knocked on her door looked surprised to find her there, as if even the servants hadn't expected a family member to be housed in such quarters. Penelope changed into her other black dress, slightly less worn, and pinned up her dark hair with trembling fingers. The dining room was ablaze with candlelight, the long mahogany table set with crystal and silver. Aunt Constance sat at the head, Uncle Henry at the foot, and the cousins flanked them like matching bookends. A place had been set for Penelope, at the far end, near the door. "Ah, there you are." Uncle Henry barely glanced up from his soup. "Constance tells me you'll be staying indefinitely." "Only until I can find a position, Uncle. Perhaps as a governess or companion." "A governess?" Beatrice laughed. "How perfectly Gothic. Like Jane Eyre. Although Jane Eyre caught her employer's eye, didn't she?" Cordelia smiled wickedly. "I hardly think Penelope need worry about such complications." "Girls," Aunt Constance said mildly, which was not a reprimand at all. "We're having a house party next week," Beatrice announced, her eyes gleaming. "All the most eligible gentlemen in the county will attend. Lord Pemberton, the Ashford brothers, and—" She paused dramatically. "The Duke of Thornfield. Sebastian Wickliffe?" Uncle Henry looked up with interest. Good Lord, how did you manage that? Lady Thornfield is Mama's second cousin, Cordelia explained. She wrote that the Duke is finally looking to marry and would appreciate a country party away from London's scrutiny. He's divine, Beatrice sighed. 32, incredibly wealthy, and so handsome. Dark hair, grey eyes, that commanding presence. Every girl in London has been throwing themselves at him for years. He'll choose one of us, Cordelia said confidently. Mama says it's practically decided. Penelope ate her soup in silence, watching her cousins glow with anticipation. She remembered being that hopeful once, imagining her own season in London, her own romance. But that future had died with her father. You'll help us prepare, won't you, Penelope? Beatrice asked sweetly. We'll need someone to press our gowns, arrange our hair, fetch our fans. You don't mind, do you? It's the least you can do considering Mama's generosity in taking you in. Of course, Penelope murmured. That night, lying in her narrow bed, she heard laughter drifting from the upper floors where her cousins' rooms were. Large, beautiful spaces she'd played in as a child. She touched her mother's pearl earrings, her only remaining treasure, and wondered how long she could endure this before her spirit broke entirely. The week passed in a blur of preparations as Ashworth Estate transformed into a showcase of wealth and elegance. Penelope spent her days running errands for her cousins, delivering notes to the dressmaker, fetching ribbons from the village, pressing endless layers of silk and muslin. Her hands grew red and rough from the work. At night, she collapsed into bed exhausted, but sleep rarely came. Instead, she lay awake listening to her cousin's excited chatter about the Duke and imagining a future that seemed impossibly distant. On the morning the guests were to arrive, chaos descended on the house. Beatrice had a crisis over her hair. Cordelia's best gown had a torn hem. The housekeeper needed help arranging flowers. Penelope moved through it all like a ghost, her own appearance forgotten until her aunt stopped her in the hallway. You're not planning to appear like that, are you? Penelope looked down at her black dress, the better of her too, but still obviously worn and outdated. I'm in mourning, Aunt. Half mourning would be acceptable now. The timing is appropriate. Aunt Constance sighed. I suppose you have nothing else. No, Mum. Very well. You'll dine with us. I can hardly hide you entirely, but do try to be unobtrusive. And for heaven's sake, don't monopolize conversation. The gentlemen are here to meet Beatrice and Cordelia. The first guests arrived at 3 o'clock. Carriages rolled up the drive in steady succession, disgorging elegantly dressed ladies and gentlemen who were greeted with champagne and warm welcomes. Penelope watched from the library window, a place she'd claimed as her sanctuary. The library was rarely used by her cousins, who preferred gossip to reading, and here, among the leather-bound volumes, she felt almost at peace. She was deep in a philosophy text when the door opened. I was told the Ashworth Library was impressive, but this is extraordinary. The voice was deep, cultured, unmistakably masculine. Penelope looked up and felt her breath catch. The man in the doorway was tall and broad-shouldered, dressed in perfectly tailored black that emphasized his athletic build. Dark hair, grey eyes that seemed to see everything, a face that was handsome but more than that. Intelligent, intense, alive with curiosity. This had to be him. I apologize, she said quickly, starting to rise. I didn't mean to intrude. Please, don't leave on my account. He crossed the room with easy confidence, his eyes scanning the bookshelves. I came seeking refuge from the introductions. Everyone is very enthusiastic. A smile tugged at Penelope's lips. The Ashworths do excel at enthusiasm. You're not one of them. His gaze settled on her with sudden interest. I'm Penelope Whitmore, Lady Ashworth's niece. Sebastian Wickliffe. He extended his hand. When she hesitated, surprise flickered in his eyes. You know who I am. Everyone knows who you are, Your Grace. Yet you're not eager to shake my hand. That's refreshingly different. His smile was wry, self-aware. What are you reading? She showed him the spine. Mills on Liberty. His eyebrows rose. Impressive. Do you agree with his harm principle? I think the question of where individual freedom ends and social responsibility begins is more complex than Mill allows. The words came before she could stop them, before she remembered she was supposed to be unobtrusive. He treats humans as if we exist in isolation, but we're fundamentally social creatures. Our choices ripple outward. Exactly. Sebastian's face lit with genuine pleasure. Everyone reads Mill and nods along, but you're the first person I've met who sees the philosophical gap. Have you read his work on women's suffrage? The subjection of women? Yes, though I found it both enlightening and frustrating. Miss Whitmore! Aunt Constance's voice cut through the library like a knife. There you are. The guests are gathering in the drawing room. We've been looking everywhere for you. I apologize, Aunt. I was just... The Duke shouldn't be bothered with... Aunt Constance's eyes widened as she realized who Penelope was talking to. Your Grace, I had no idea you'd arrived. Please, come meet my daughters. They're so eager to make your acquaintance. Sebastian's expression shifted, becoming politely pleasant, but somehow more distant. Of course, Lady Ashworth. He glanced back at Penelope. Perhaps we can continue our discussion later, Miss Whitmore. Perhaps, she said softly, knowing it wouldn't happen. The drawing room was a sea of silk and jewels, animated faces and practiced smiles. Penelope found a chair in the corner and tried to disappear, watching as her cousins descended on the Duke like beautiful predatory birds. Beatrice laughed at something he said, touching his arm with casual intimacy. Cordelia offered him tea with her most dazzling smile. They were good at this, Penelope realized. The art of attraction, the performance of charm. They would make perfect duchesses. But across the room, his eyes found hers. Just for a moment, their gazes locked, and something passed between them. Recognition, perhaps, or curiosity, or the beginning of something that would change everything. That evening at dinner, the seating had been carefully arranged. Sebastian sat between Beatrice and Cordelia, with Lady Pemberton on Beatrice's other side and Lord Ashford beside Cordelia. Penelope was far down the table, wedged between an elderly gentleman who was nearly deaf and a young vicar who was painfully shy. She ate in silence, watching the glittering conversation at the head of the table. "The Duke seems quite taken with you, Bee," Cordelia said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Oh, do you think so?" Beatrice practically glowed. "He did ask about my interests. I told him I adore poetry and music. Do you read much, Your Grace?" Cordelia leaned forward, her décolletage on display. "When I can find the time," Sebastian replied politely. But his eyes, Penelope noticed because she couldn't help watching him, his eyes kept drifting down the table toward her. After dinner, the party moved to the music room. Beatrice played the pianoforte with technical perfection, but little feeling. Cordelia sang a sweet ballad in a lovely soprano. The gentlemen applauded. The ladies admired. Penelope stood near the door, ready to slip away to her small room. "Miss Whitmore," his voice was quiet, meant only for her. Sebastian had somehow crossed the room without her noticing. "Are you leaving so soon?" "I'm tired, Your Grace. It's been a long day. Will you walk with me in the garden first? Just for a moment. I find I'm not ready to sleep." "That wouldn't be appropriate. Lady Pemberton will chaperone." He gestured to the elderly lady dozing near the window. "Please, I'd like to finish our earlier conversation." She should refuse. She knew that. But the way he looked at her, as if she were the most interesting person in the room, as if her thoughts mattered, made her weak. "Just for a moment," she whispered. The garden was luminous in the moonlight, the carefully tended paths winding between roses and hedges. Lady Pemberton trailed behind them at a discreet distance, half asleep, but present enough for propriety's sake. Sebastian walked beside Penelope with his hands clasped behind his back, his tall frame casting shadows across the gravel. "You were right earlier," he said, "about Mill's gap in logic. Individual freedom sounds noble until you realize we're all interconnected. Your freedom to, say, operate a factory, affects my freedom to breathe clean air. You've thought about this? Penelope said, surprised. I think about many things. Too many, my mother says. She thinks I should focus on estate management and finding a wife. His tone was self-deprecating, but with an edge of genuine frustration, as if those are the only matters worthy of a duke's attention. And what do you think deserves your attention? He stopped walking, turning to face her fully. Ideas. Progress. The question of how to use wealth and position to actually improve people's lives, not just maintain aristocratic power. His eyes searched her face. You think that's naive? I think it's rare, Penelope said quietly. Most men of your position are content with what they have. Content is just another word for complacent. He started walking again, slower this time. Tell me about yourself, Miss Whitmore. How does a young woman come to read Mill and engage with philosophy? My father was a scholar, a country vicar with a passion for learning. He taught me Greek, Latin, history, philosophy, everything he would have taught a son had he been blessed with one. The familiar grief tightened her throat. He died 6 months ago. Pneumonia. I'm sorry. The sympathy in his voice sounded genuine, not performative. And your mother? She died when I was 12. It was always just father and I after that. Penelope looked up at the stars, fighting the sting of tears. He left debts. The church living went to another vicar. I had nothing, so Aunt Constance took me in. That was generous of her. Was it? The question escaped before Penelope could stop it. She immediately regretted it. One didn't speak ill of benefactors, especially to visiting dukes, but Sebastian's expression darkened with understanding. The small room near the servants' quarters, he said quietly. I saw you going there earlier, and at dinner, seated far from the family. They treat you as a dependent, not a relation. They've given me a home. They've given you a prison. His voice was suddenly fierce. You should be treated with respect, not used as unpaid labor for their social ambitions. The vehemence in his tone startled her. Why do you care? Because... He stopped himself, jaw tightening. Because it's unjust. Because intelligence and worth aren't determined by one's bank balance. Because you deserve better. The air between them seemed to thicken, charged with something Penelope didn't dare name. In the moonlight, his eyes were no longer grey, but silver, intense and searching. She felt seen in a way she hadn't been since her father's death, truly seen, not for what she lacked, but for what she was. Miss Whitmore, your grace. Lady Pemberton's querulous voice broke the spell. It's growing cold. We should return inside. The walk back to the house was silent, but Penelope felt his presence beside her like heat. At the door, he took her hand, properly, formally, and bowed over it. Thank you for the conversation, he said. It was the most genuine exchange I've had in months. Your Grace, she murmured, withdrawing her hand before she could think about how warm his fingers felt. Inside, Beatrice and Cordelia were waiting in the entrance hall, their expressions sharp with suspicion. There you are, Beatrice exclaimed. We were wondering where you disappeared to, Your Grace. Miss Whitmore was kind enough to show me the gardens, Sebastian said smoothly. Lady Pemberton chaperoned, of course. How nice. Cordelia's smile didn't reach her eyes. Though Penelope, you must be exhausted. All that work you've been doing for us. Perhaps you should retire. It wasn't a suggestion. Penelope curtsied and fled to her room, feeling their cold stares following her up the servants' staircase. She didn't sleep that night. Instead, she lay awake, replaying every word, every look, every moment in the garden. The Duke of Thornfield had sought her company, listened to her opinions, treated her as an equal. It meant nothing, of course. Men like him didn't marry women like her. Tomorrow he would return his attention to Beatrice and Cordelia, and Penelope would retreat to the library and her books and the quiet resignation of her circumstances. But tonight, just for tonight, she let herself remember how it felt to be seen. The next morning brought a flurry of planned activities, a riding party followed by a picnic on the estate grounds. Penelope had no riding habit, of course, so she volunteered to help the servants prepare the picnic baskets. Better to be useful than to sit watching her cousins parade in their beautiful habits, laughing and flirting on horseback while she remained behind like a servant. But as the riding party assembled on the front drive, Sebastian appeared at her elbow. "You're not joining us, Miss Whitmore." She gestured to her worn black dress. "I'm not appropriately attired for riding, Your Grace. Surely something can be arranged." "Penelope doesn't ride," Beatrice interrupted smoothly, spectacular in midnight blue velvet. "She's always been rather timid about horses. Haven't you, cousin?" It was a lie. Penelope had ridden since childhood, but contradicting Beatrice would only create a scene, so she remained silent. Sebastian's eyes narrowed slightly, but he said nothing. The party mounted up and departed in a thunder of hooves and laughter, leaving Penelope alone on the drive. She retreated to the library, trying to lose herself in Wordsworth's poetry, but the words blurred on the page. Through the window, she could see the estate grounds stretching away, the same paths where she'd walked last night with Sebastian, having the most interesting conversation of her life. Now he was out there with her cousins, and she was here alone, as she always would be. The riding party returned 3 hours later, everyone flushed and happy. Penelope watched from the library window as Sebastian helped Beatrice dismount, his hands on her waist, her gloved fingers resting on his shoulders. They stood that way for a moment too long, and jealousy, hot and unwelcome, flared in Penelope's chest. She had no right to this feeling, none whatsoever. At the picnic, she helped serve the food, playing the role of dutiful dependent while the guests ate and laughed beneath the spreading oak trees. Lord Edmund Ashford, a handsome widower in his mid-30s, surprised her by bringing her a plate. "You haven't eaten anything, Miss Whitmore." "I'm not particularly hungry, my lord." "Please, sit." He gestured to a space beside him on the blanket. "I can't enjoy my meal knowing you're going without." He was kind, she realized. Genuinely kind, without ulterior motive. They talked quietly about books and the countryside, and it was pleasant, if not thrilling. Across the lawn, she felt eyes on her and looked up to find Sebastian watching them, his expression unreadable. That evening, there was to be dancing in the ballroom. Penelope intended to hide in the library again, but Aunt Constance had other plans. "You will attend," she said firmly. "Lord Ashford asked specifically if you'd be present. I won't have it said that the Ashworths are inhospitable." So Penelope found herself in the ballroom, wearing the same black dress she'd worn every evening, watching the whirl of colours as couples danced. Beatrice danced with Sebastian twice, glowing with triumph. Cordelia danced with him once, laughing prettily at something he said. Each dance felt like a blade to Penelope's heart, though she told herself she was being ridiculous. "Miss Whitmore." Lord Edmund appeared at her side, bowing. "Would you do me the honour?" It would have been rude to refuse. She let him lead her onto the floor for a country dance, grateful for his easy conversation and careful steps. He didn't hold her too close or presume too much, just offered genuine companionship. But then the dance formation turned her, and suddenly she was face to face with Sebastian as partners switched. His hand caught hers, warm even through their gloves. "You do ride," he said quietly, intensely. "I saw your face when your cousin lied. It doesn't matter. It matters to me." The dance pulled them apart, then together again. "Why do you let them treat you this way?" "Because I have no choice," she whispered fiercely. "Because pride doesn't pay for food or shelter. Because not all of us have the luxury of defying propriety." The dance ended. Sebastian released her hand reluctantly, his jaw tight with frustration. Edmund returned to claim her for the next set, and Penelope let him, needing distance from those penetrating grey eyes that seemed to see too much. She didn't notice the way Sebastian watched her dance with Edmund, his hands clenched at his sides, didn't see the jealousy darkening his expression as Edmund made her smile, didn't understand that while she was guarding her heart against impossible dreams, His was already beyond saving. The next 3 days fell into a pattern that was both wonderful and agonizing. During the day, Sebastian was claimed by the hostesses and their daughters, touring the estate, playing lawn games, sitting for tea. He danced attendance on Beatrice and Cordelia with polite interest, exactly as was expected of him as the party's most eligible bachelor. But in the stolen moments between planned activities, he sought Penelope out. She would be in the library, and he would appear, asking about a book recommendation. They would talk for 20 minutes before someone came looking for him. Or she would be walking the gardens early in the morning, and he would join her, their conversation ranging from philosophy to politics to literature. Once they debated the morality of inherited wealth for nearly an hour in the conservatory, hidden by ferns, both of them forgetting time and propriety until a footman's cough reminded them of reality. These moments were precious and painful. Precious because in them Penelope felt like herself again, intelligent, worthy of engagement, alive. Painful because each moment made it harder to remember why she couldn't want him. And she did want him. God help her. She wanted him with an intensity that frightened her. Edmund, meanwhile, continued his gentle courtship. He brought her books from his own library. He included her in conversations at dinner, defending her when Cordelia made cutting remarks about her dress. He was everything kind and decent, offering friendship and respect. "He's going to propose," Beatrice said one afternoon, her voice dripping with false sympathy. She'd cornered Penelope in the upper hallway, Cordelia at her side. "Lord Ashford, I mean. Everyone's noticed how attentive he is." "That's Penelope's good fortune," Cordelia added. "A widower with a modest estate and 3 motherless children. Perfect for a girl in your position." "You should accept him," Beatrice said. "You won't receive a better offer, certainly not from anyone else." Her eyes glittered with malice. The Duke, for instance, would never consider someone so far beneath him. "I know that," Penelope said quietly. "Do you?" Cordelia moved closer. "Because we've noticed how you monopolize his attention with your little library conversations. It's quite inappropriate. He's being polite, Penelope, but you're embarrassing yourself." "And us," Beatrice added. "People are starting to talk. They're wondering why the poor relation is throwing herself at a duke, while perfectly suitable men like Lord Ashford are showing genuine interest." Penelope's face burned. "I haven't thrown myself, haven't you?" Beatrice's smile was cruel. "Lurking in the library where you know he'll look, taking early morning walks where you'll accidentally encounter him. It's desperate, cousin, and it reflects poorly on our family." "Mama has asked us to speak with you," Cordelia said, her voice falsely gentle. "For your own good. You need to understand your place, Penelope. You're here on charity. The Duke is being kind because that's what dukes do. They're gracious to everyone, even those far beneath them. Don't mistake courtesy for interest." They swept away in a rustle of expensive silk, leaving Penelope trembling in the hallway. Were they right? Had she been deluding herself? She thought of every conversation with Sebastian, analyzing them with new, horrified eyes. Had she been forcing her company on him? Had he been too polite to refuse her? That evening, she avoided the library entirely. When Edmund sought her out in the drawing room, she was warmer to him than usual, letting him sit beside her, accepting his attention with gratitude instead of guilty discomfort. He was real. He was offering something genuine. She should be grateful. Across the room, Sebastian stood with Beatrice, who was showing him something in a fashion periodical, but his eyes kept finding Penelope. Each time their gazes met, she looked away quickly, fear and shame making her cowardly. After dinner, the guests gathered in the drawing room for charades and conversation. Penelope helped serve coffee, trying to be invisible, but Edmund kept drawing her into the group's discussions. He was determined to include her, to show everyone that she was worthy of respect and attention. It was kind of him, more than kind. "Miss Whitmore," he said during a lull in conversation, "I understand you're quite well read. Perhaps you could suggest what we should tackle for our literary discussion tomorrow?" "Oh, Penelope reads everything," Cordelia interjected with a laugh. "Father's entire library, I think. She practically lived in there." "Your father's library?" Lord Pemberton looked interested. "Was he a collector?" "He was a vicar," Beatrice said before Penelope could answer. "A country vicar who apparently taught his daughter above her station." The room went uncomfortably quiet. Edmund's face flushed with anger, but before he could speak, Sebastian's voice cut through the tension. "Education above one's station?" He set down his coffee cup with deliberate care. "What a curious phrase, Lady Beatrice. I wasn't aware that knowledge had social boundaries. I think you meant exactly what you said." Sebastian's tone was pleasant, but his eyes were steel. "That some people, women particularly, and women without fortune especially, shouldn't be educated beyond basic accomplishments. That Miss Whitmore's father made an error in teaching his daughter to think critically, to engage with philosophy and literature, to be more than an ornament." Beatrice's face went white, then red. "Your Grace, I didn't mean to offend, yet you did." He turned to Penelope, and his expression softened. "Your father sounds like a remarkable man, Miss Whitmore. A man who understood that a curious mind is a gift, regardless of whether it belongs to a son or daughter. I would have liked to know him." Penelope's throat tightened. "Thank you, Your Grace." The conversation moved on, but the atmosphere remained strained. Aunt Constance shot Penelope furious glances. Beatrice and Cordelia were rigid with humiliation. Edmund looked both pleased and concerned, as if worried that Sebastian's defense would only make things worse for Penelope. And Sebastian watched her with an intensity that made her heart race. When the party finally dispersed for the night, Penelope escaped to her small room, but she'd barely closed the door before someone knocked. Cautiously, she opened it to find one of the housemaids. "Miss Whitmore, Lady Beatrice wants to see you in her room, now." Dread settled in Penelope's stomach. She climbed the stairs to the family wing, so different from her own cramped quarters. Beatrice's room was enormous, decorated in shades of cream and gold. Cordelia was there too, both of them still in their evening gowns, faces flushed with anger. "How dare you?" Beatrice hissed the moment Penelope entered. "I don't understand. Making the Duke defend you. Making us look like shrews in front of everyone." Cordelia advanced on her. "We told you to stop monopolizing his attention. We warned you." "I haven't monopolized anything. He sought me out." "Liar!" Beatrice's hand cracked across Penelope's face. The slap shocked more than hurt, though Penelope's cheek stung. She stood frozen, one hand to her face, staring at her cousin in disbelief. "That's what you deserve," Beatrice said coldly, "for being an ungrateful, scheming little fortune hunter. Did you think we wouldn't notice? Did you think Mama wouldn't see? You're trying to trap him," Cordelia added, "using your sad story and your books to make yourself interesting. But he's too intelligent to fall for it. He was just being polite, defending you like that. Tomorrow he'll realize what you are. I'm not trying to trap anyone." "Then prove it." Beatrice moved closer. "Stay away from the Duke. Stop skulking around the library. Stop taking early walks. If he seeks you out, tell him you're busy. Do you understand?" Penelope understood perfectly. She also understood that she had no power here, no protection, nowhere else to go. "Yes, good." Beatrice smiled, but it was a terrible expression. "Remember, Penelope, you're here because we allow it. Cross us again, and you'll find yourself on the street. Now get out." Penelope fled to her room, her face burning where Beatrice had struck her. She pressed her fingers to her cheek and felt tears spill over, not tears of pain, but of humiliation and rage and grief. They were right about one thing: she was powerless. All her education, all her father's lessons about dignity and worth, meant nothing when she had no money, no family support, no options. She thought about Sebastian's defense of her, the way he'd looked at her cousins with such disgust. It had been wonderful and terrible. Wonderful because someone had finally stood up for her. Terrible, because now she would pay the price. In the morning, she would do as her cousins demanded. She would avoid Sebastian, refuse his company, retreat into the shadows where poor relations belonged. It didn't matter that his conversations made her feel alive for the first time in months. It didn't matter that she saw something in his eyes that looked like genuine regard, maybe even the beginning of affection. She couldn't afford to matter to him. She couldn't afford to let herself hope. The next morning, Penelope kept her promise to her cousins. When Sebastian appeared in the library, she claimed a headache and fled. When he joined the breakfast table, she ate quickly and excused herself. She saw the confusion in his eyes, the flicker of hurt, and it cut her deeply. But what choice did she have? Better to hurt him now with coldness than to continue this impossible connection that could only end in disaster for her. Edmund noticed immediately. "Are you unwell, Miss Whitmore? You seem distressed." "I'm fine, Lord Ashford, just tired. Perhaps a change of scenery would help." He smiled gently. "Several of us are planning an excursion to the village tomorrow. Fresh air and different surroundings might lift your spirits." She meant to refuse, but Aunt Constance was listening, and refusing would seem ungrateful. "That sounds lovely. Thank you." The village excursion was planned for a party of 12. Penelope hoped Sebastian wouldn't attend, hoped he'd grown tired of country entertainments and would stay behind. But when the carriages assembled, he was there, helping Beatrice into the first vehicle, while Cordelia claimed the seat beside him. Penelope rode in the second carriage with Edmund, Lady Pemberton, and an elderly gentleman who slept the entire journey. Edmund kept up pleasant conversation, pointing out landmarks and asking about her interests. He was trying so hard to make her comfortable, and she felt guilty for not being more enthusiastic. The village was charming. Stone cottages with thatched roofs, a village green, shops displaying their wares. The party split up to explore, with Beatrice and Cordelia immediately claiming Sebastian as their personal escort. Penelope watched them disappear into a milliner's shop, Beatrice's hand possessively on his arm. "Shall we visit the bookshop?" Edmund suggested. "I noticed one across the green." The bookshop was a tiny space crammed with volumes, smelling of leather and old paper. Penelope lost herself immediately, running her fingers along spines, pulling out treasures. Edmund watched her with obvious fondness. "You light up around books," he observed. "They're old friends, reliable ones." "Miss Whitmore, Penelope, if I may, I wonder if I might speak with you frankly." Her heart sank. She knew what was coming. "Of course, Lord Ashford." "Edmund, please." He took a breath. "I'm sure you've noticed my particular attention these past days. I want you to understand that it's quite genuine. I find you remarkable, intelligent, kind, genuine, in a world full of artifice." He paused. "I know I'm not a young man anymore. I'm a widower with children and a modest estate, but I could offer you respect, security, a home where you'd be mistress rather than dependent. I would be honored if you'd consider—" "My lord," she stopped him gently, "you do me great honor, but I cannot accept without being entirely honest with you. You care for someone else." It wasn't a question. Penelope closed her eyes. "It doesn't matter. He's not. It's impossible." "The Duke," Edmund said it flatly. "I've seen the way you look at each other. There's nothing between us. There's everything between you. I see it, and I suspect others do too." He smiled sadly. "I had hoped, but I'm not a fool, Penelope. I won't press a suit where a woman's heart is already engaged. My heart isn't engaged. It can't be." The words came out fierce, desperate. "He's a duke. I'm nobody. It's a fantasy, nothing more." "Is it?" Edmund studied her face. "I've watched him these past days. The way he seeks you out, the way he defended you last night. That's not courtesy, my dear. That's genuine regard." "It doesn't matter," she repeated, voice breaking. Even if there were something, it could never come to anything. His family would never permit it. Society would never accept it. I would destroy his reputation and gain nothing but heartbreak. So you'll accept me instead, out of practicality." "I haven't said—" "Don't," He caught her hand. Don't settle for kindness when you could have passion. Don't accept safety when you could have joy. Life is too short for such compromises. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. I married for duty the first time, and while Margaret was a good woman, we were never in love. I won't make another loveless match, and I won't ask you to either. He released her hand. But my offer stands, Penelope. If you find yourself in need of rescue, practical rescue, not romantic, I'm here, as a friend, if nothing else. Thank you, she whispered. You're a good man, Edmund, but not the right man. He smiled wryly. Come, we should return to the others before people talk. They emerged from the bookshop to find storm clouds gathering overhead, turning the afternoon prematurely dark. The rest of the party was scattered across the green, some ducking into shops as the first drops began to fall. Penelope looked around for shelter and spotted a small gazebo near the village church. She'd barely reached it when the sky opened up, rain sheeting down in torrents. Other figures ran for cover. She recognized Lady Pemberton and several others crowding into the inn, and then someone else ducked into the gazebo, shaking water from his dark hair. Sebastian. They stood frozen, alone in the small space, while rain drummed on the wooden roof. He was soaked, his coat dripping, hair plastered to his forehead. Even wet and disheveled, he was beautiful. Penelope's breath caught as their eyes met. You've been avoiding me, he said. I've been busy. Don't lie. He moved closer. 3 days ago, we were having the most interesting conversations of my life. Yesterday you could barely look at me. What happened? Nothing happened. Penelope. The way he said her name, intimate, demanding, made her shiver. Talk to me, please. I can't. She wrapped her arms around herself, cold and trembling. Whatever this is between us, it can't continue. Why not? Because you're a duke. The words exploded out of her. Because I'm nobody. Because people are talking and my cousins are furious and I'm making everything worse by letting myself... By letting yourself what? He was very close now, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from him despite his wet clothes. Care, she whispered. By letting myself care when I have no right to. No right, his voice was rough. Penelope, you have every right. I don't. You'll choose Beatrice or Cordelia or some other appropriate girl with money and breeding, and I'll watch it happen, and it will kill me. Tears mixed with rain on her face. So please, please stop being kind to me. Stop seeking me out. Stop making me hope for impossible things. What if they're not impossible? He caught her arms, his touch burning through her wet sleeves. What if I don't want Beatrice or Cordelia? What if I want... Don't say it. She pulled away, desperate. Don't say something you'll regret. You're caught up in the romance of a country party, but when you return to London and reality, you'll realize that I'm in love with you. The words hung between them like a confession. Because I am, Penelope. I've been fighting it for days, telling myself all the reasons I shouldn't want you, but it doesn't matter. You're brilliant and brave and so goddamn beautiful it hurts to look at you. Sebastian. She'd never used his name before. It felt like a boundary crossed. I know all the arguments against this. He moved closer again, slowly, as if approaching a frightened animal. I know what society expects. I know my family will object. I know this is madness. His hand came up, trembling, to touch her cheek where Beatrice had struck her. His thumb traced the fading mark with infinite gentleness. But I cannot bear to see you treated as less than you are. I cannot pretend I don't feel this. This? Her voice was barely a whisper. This consuming need to be near you, to hear your thoughts, to make you smile. His hand slid into her wet hair, cradling her head. To kiss you, until you understand that you're not nobody. You're everything. We can't. I know. His forehead pressed against hers. I know we can't, but for just this moment while the rain hides us, could we pretend? Could we be just Sebastian and Penelope, not Duke and dependent? She knew she should push him away, knew this moment would only make everything harder, but she was so tired of being strong, so tired of denying what she wanted. So instead, she tilted her face up in answer. His kiss was gentle at first, questioning, giving her time to change her mind. But when she pressed closer, her hands fisting in his wet coat, gentleness gave way to hunger. He kissed her like a man starving, one hand in her hair, the other at her waist, pulling her against him. She'd never been kissed before, had nothing to compare it to, but she understood instinctively that this was extraordinary, that this combination of tenderness and passion was rare. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, reality came crashing back. Footsteps on the path, voices calling through the rain. "Sebastian, your grace, where are you?" They sprang apart. Edmund appeared at the gazebo entrance, umbrella in hand, and his eyes went straight to Penelope's swollen lips, her mussed hair, Sebastian's dishevelled state. Understanding and something like pain crossed his face. "The rain is letting up," he said carefully. "The carriages are assembling." "Of course." Sebastian's voice was steady, but his hand shook slightly as he straightened his coat. "Thank you, Ashford." Edmund looked at Penelope for a long moment, then turned and left without another word. "Penelope," Sebastian began. "This was a mistake," she said, voice breaking. "Please, forget this happened." "How can I forget?" "You must." She pushed past him into the drizzle, not caring that she was getting wetter, "for both our sakes." The ride back to Ashworth Estate was torturous. Penelope sat rigidly beside Edmund, hyper-aware of Sebastian in the carriage ahead. Her lips still tingled. Her body still hummed, with the memory of his touch. She'd been kissed by a duke, and now she had to pretend it meant nothing. That evening, Penelope retreated to her room, pleading illness. She couldn't face dinner, couldn't sit at that table knowing that everyone would see her guilt written on her face, couldn't watch Sebastian being polite to her cousins when she could still taste him on her lips. A maid brought her a tray, and with it a note written in a bold, masculine hand. "We need to talk tonight. Library, please. S." She burned the note in her candle flame and didn't go, but staying away didn't make her safe. 2 hours later, there was a soft knock on her door. Thinking it was the maid returning for the tray, Penelope opened it and found Beatrice and Cordelia, their faces twisted with malicious glee. "We know," Beatrice said softly, dangerously. Penelope's blood went cold. "Know what?" "That you were alone with the Duke in the village gazebo." Cordelia pushed into the room, uninvited. "Lady Ashford's maid saw you. She said you were—" She paused dramatically. "Embracing." "We weren't—" "Don't bother lying." Beatrice closed the door behind them. "The question is what we do with this information." "What do you want?" Penelope asked, defeated. "For you to leave." Cordelia's voice was pure venom. "Tomorrow, make some excuse. Say you've received word of a position, or that you need to visit a friend. We don't care. Just leave Ashworth Estate and never come back. And if I refuse, then we tell everyone what you did." Beatrice smiled cruelly. "We'll say you threw yourself at the Duke, that you manipulated him into compromising you, hoping to trap him into marriage. By the time we're finished, you'll be ruined. No one will take you in. No one will employ you. You'll end up on the streets where you belong. He sought me out. Who will believe that?" Cordelia laughed. "A duke seeking out a penniless nobody? No, my dear. Everyone will believe you seduced him. You with your books and your clever conversation, trying to rise above your station." Penelope sank onto her bed, mind racing. They had her cornered. If they spread these lies, and even the truth would be damaging enough, she would be unemployable. No respectable family would take her as a governess or companion. She would have nothing. "What about your own reputations?" she asked desperately. "If word gets out that your cousin is a seductress—" "Oh, we'll be devastated," Beatrice said mockingly. "Shocked by your betrayal, victims of your deception. If anything, it will make us more sympathetic, more desirable. The Duke will see us as the innocent parties, and he'll want to make amends by choosing one of us." It was clever, diabolical and clever. "One day," Cordelia said, "you have one day to pack your things and leave, or we start talking." They left her there, trembling with rage and fear. She could go to Sebastian, tell him what they were threatening. But what could he do? Defend her honor by admitting they'd kissed? That would force him into an engagement he hadn't chosen, trap him into a marriage that would be seen as a scandal. Or worse, he might refuse to marry her even after admitting the kiss, and then she'd be ruined with nothing to show for it. Either way, she destroyed him or destroyed herself. The next morning, Penelope made her decision. She would leave, but not quietly. She would tell Sebastian the truth first, give him a chance to understand why she had to go. She wrote him a brief note asking him to meet her in the library at dawn, before the household stirred. He was there when she arrived, looking as if he hadn't slept. The moment he saw her face, his expression darkened. "What happened?" "I'm leaving today," she said without preamble. "I wanted to say goodbye." "Leaving? Why?" He crossed the room in 3 strides, catching her hands. "Penelope, what's wrong?" "My cousins know about yesterday. About the kiss." She watched his face carefully. "They've threatened to ruin me unless I leave immediately. Those vicious—" He bit off the curse. "Let them try. I'll tell everyone the truth, that I pursued you, that the kiss was my doing." "No." She pulled her hands free. "Don't you see? That only makes it worse. Either you're forced into a marriage you didn't plan, or you refuse to marry me and I'm ruined anyway. My cousins win either way. This isn't about winning, isn't it?" She laughed bitterly. "Sebastian, please, let me go quietly. Forget this ever happened. Marry someone appropriate and be happy." "Happy?" He stared at her as if she'd lost her mind. "How can I be happy without you? You barely know me. You'll forget—" "I won't." He caught her face in his hands, forcing her to meet his eyes. "Listen to me. Yes, this is happening fast. Yes, society will judge us. Yes, there will be complications. But I don't care. I don't want appropriate. I don't want easy. I want you. You can't want me enough to weather the scandal, can't I?" His voice turned fierce. "Penelope, I've spent my entire life doing what was expected, inheriting at 20, managing estates, being the perfect duke, playing the role everyone demanded, and I was miserable. Then I met you, and for the first time in years I felt alive. Do you think I'll give that up because your cousins are blackmailing you? What are you saying?" "I'm saying marry me." The words came out rushed, desperate. "Not because we're forced. Not because of scandal, but because I love you, and I hope, you love me too." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "Sebastian, I can't." "Why not?" He was almost shaking her. "Give me one real reason, not what society thinks, not what your cousins threatened. One reason from your heart." "Because I'm terrified." The admission burst out of her. "Because I don't know how to be a duchess. Because I'll embarrass you and make mistakes, and your family will hate me. Because I'm not enough. You're everything," he interrupted fiercely. "You're brilliant and brave and more than enough. Will my mother be difficult? Probably. Will society gossip? Certainly. Will there be challenges? Yes. But Penelope—" His thumb wiped away her tears. "I've been alone in a crowd my entire life. Until you. Don't send me back to that loneliness because you're afraid." She wanted to say yes. God, she wanted it so much it hurt. But doubt and fear warred with hope. "What if you regret it?" she whispered. "What if in 5 years you look at me and wish you'd married someone else? Then I'll be the biggest fool in England." He pressed his forehead to hers. "But I won't regret it, Penelope. I couldn't. Not when you're the only person who sees me. Not the title or the wealth, but me. Not when you make me want to be better than I am." "I do love you," she confessed. "So much it terrifies me." "Then be terrified with me." His lips brushed hers softly. "Say yes. Choose us over fear." Before she could answer, the library door burst open. Beatrice and Cordelia stood there, Aunt Constance behind them, all 3 looking triumphant. "We heard voices," Beatrice said loudly, "and found them here, alone, unchaperoned, again." "How convenient," Cordelia added, catching them in yet another compromising position. Sebastian's arms tightened around Penelope protectively. "Lady Ashworth, your daughters have been blackmailing Miss Whitmore. I suggest you control them before I make their behavior very public." "Blackmail?" Aunt Constance's eyes glittered. "I think not, Your Grace. My daughters were simply trying to protect our family from a fortune hunter." "Fortune hunter?" Sebastian's voice turned to ice. "Choose your next words carefully, madam." "What else would you call a girl who throws herself at the richest bachelor in England?" Cordelia asked sweetly. "I would call her the woman I intend to marry." Sebastian's words rang through the library. "Miss Whitmore has done me the honor of accepting my proposal. We're engaged." Silence. Beatrice's face went white, then red. Cordelia looked as if she might faint. Aunt Constance's mouth opened and closed like a fish. "You can't be serious," Beatrice finally gasped. "Perfectly serious." He pulled Penelope closer, his eyes daring them to object. "The banns will be read starting this Sunday. The wedding will be in 6 weeks. You're all invited, of course, though I'll understand if you choose not to attend." "Sebastian," Penelope whispered, "you don't have to—" "Yes, I do." He looked down at her with such love that her heart turned over. "You haven't actually said yes yet." Everyone was staring. This wasn't how she'd imagined accepting a proposal, not in front of an audience, not as a public declaration, but maybe that was better. Maybe it forced her to be brave. "Yes," she said clearly, "I'll marry you." His smile was radiant. Then, in front of her scandalized aunt and cousins, he kissed her thoroughly, claiming her in a way that left no doubt about his intentions. The next week was chaos. Sebastian's mother, the Dowager Duchess, arrived within 3 days of the announcement, appalled at her son's choice. She was a formidable woman in black silk, with iron-grey hair and eyes like chips of ice. She took one look at Penelope and pronounced her wholly unsuitable. "She has no family, no fortune, no connections," the Dowager said to Sebastian in the drawing room, not caring that Penelope was in earshot. "This marriage will be a disaster." "This marriage will be my happiness," Sebastian replied calmly. "Mother, you can accept it with grace, or you can make yourself miserable fighting it. The outcome will be the same." "But, Sebastian—" "I love her." His voice was final. "That's all that matters." The Dowager's resistance crumbled in the face of her son's certainty. By the end of her visit, she was grudgingly civil to Penelope, even offering to help with wedding preparations. It wasn't warmth, but it was something. Beatrice and Cordelia, meanwhile, had become social pariahs. Word of their treatment of Penelope had spread, Sebastian had made certain of it, and suddenly invitations dried up. Gentlemen who'd courted them backed away. They were tainted by their own cruelty. Edmund called to offer his congratulations. "I'm happy for you both," he said, and meant it. "Truly, watching you two together, it's what everyone should have, and so few find." "Thank you, Edmund." Penelope squeezed his hand. "You're a good friend." "I am," he smiled, "and I'll be here if you need me, always." The wedding preparations consumed Penelope's days. Dress fittings, guest lists, 1,000 decisions about flowers and music and menus. Sebastian's solicitors drew up settlements that made Penelope's head spin. He was settling a fortune on her, making her wealthy in her own right. She protested, but he was immovable. "If something happens to me, you'll be protected," he said firmly. "I won't leave you dependent on anyone's charity ever again." But the best moments were the quiet ones. Walking in the gardens after dinner, talking until the stars came out. Stolen kisses in the library. Sebastian reading to her while she embroidered. Learning each other, building something real beneath the romance. "Are you nervous?" he asked the night before the wedding. They were alone in the conservatory, properly chaperoned by his aunt dozing nearby, and his thumb traced circles on her palm. "Terrified," she admitted. "What if I'm terrible at being a duchess?" "You'll be extraordinary." His certainty steadied her. "You're already extraordinary, Penelope. The title just gives everyone else permission to see it." "I love you," she whispered. "I know," he smiled. "I'm a very lucky man." The wedding day dawned clear and bright. June sunshine pouring through the windows of Thornfield Cathedral. Penelope stood in the bridal room, staring at her reflection in disbelief. The woman looking back at her was radiant in ivory silk and Brussels lace, her dark hair crowned with orange blossoms, diamonds at her throat, Sebastian's wedding gift. She looked like a duchess. She looked happy. "You're beautiful, Miss Whitmore." The maid, fastening her veil, smiled. "His Grace is a lucky man." "I'm the lucky one," Penelope murmured. The cathedral was packed. Sebastian had invited everyone, his family, hers, all of society. He wanted the world to witness this marriage, to see him claim her proudly. Aunt Constance sat stiffly in a pew with a furious-looking Beatrice and Cordelia. They'd tried to refuse the invitation, but social pressure had forced them to attend. Penelope felt a moment of pity for them, then let it go. She was done being their victim. The processional began. Penelope walked down the aisle alone. She had no father to give her away, and Sebastian had suggested she come to him of her own volition. It felt right. This was her choice, her courage, her step into a new life. And then she saw him waiting at the altar, and everything else faded. He was magnificent in black and white, but it was his face that made her breath catch, the love and pride shining in his eyes as he watched her approach. This man loved her. This extraordinary man had chosen her. The ceremony was beautiful, traditional words spoken with genuine feeling. His hands were steady as he slid the ring onto her finger, though hers trembled. When the vicar pronounced them husband and wife, Sebastian's kiss was tender and brief, proper for the church. But his eyes promised more later. "Duchess," he whispered against her lips. "Duke," she answered, and they both laughed. The wedding breakfast was a lavish affair at Thornfield House, Sebastian's London residence. Penelope had never seen such luxury. Crystal chandeliers, gold plate, servants everywhere. But Sebastian kept her close, his hand at her back, introducing her to everyone with unmistakable pride. "Your Grace." An elderly lady approached, someone important judging by the deference others showed her. "I must confess, I thought your husband mad when I heard about this match. A nobody, I heard. No family, no fortune." Penelope tensed, but the lady continued, "But I can see I was wrong. You're no nobody, my dear. You're exactly what he needed. Someone real in this artificial world. Be good to him." "I will," Penelope promised. Throughout the celebration, she caught glimpses of Sebastian watching her, at the head table during the dancing, while cutting the cake. Each time, his expression was one of wonder, as if he couldn't quite believe she was his. She knew the feeling. 10 months later, Penelope stood in the nursery at Thornfield Estate, their country home, holding their daughter. Little Margaret, named for Penelope's mother, had Sebastian's dark hair and her grey eyes, and she was perfect, absolutely perfect. "There you are." Sebastian appeared in the doorway, still in his riding clothes, mud-splattered and gorgeous. "How are my girls?" "Sleepy," Penelope said, smiling as he crossed to kiss her, then press his lips to their daughter's forehead. "She's just gone down." They stood together, watching Margaret sleep, and Penelope thought about how much had changed. She was the Duchess of Thornfield now, respected and even loved in the local community. She'd started a school for girls in the village, teaching them reading and mathematics. Sebastian's mother had thawed considerably, especially after Margaret's birth, and Penelope herself had grown into her role, learning to navigate society with grace while remaining true to herself. "What are you thinking?" Sebastian asked softly. "That I'm happy." She leaned into him. "That I never imagined I could be this happy." "I told you." He wrapped his arms around her. "You're everything, Penelope. Everything I didn't know I needed." They'd faced challenges, of course. Society matrons who'd snubbed her at first. Sebastian's distant cousins who'd thought he was throwing himself away. Moments when Penelope doubted herself, wondered if she was enough. But Sebastian had been her anchor through it all, loving her fiercely and publicly, never letting her forget her worth. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked quietly. Choosing me instead of someone easier? Never. He turned her to face him. Not for one moment. You're my best friend, my intellectual equal, my greatest joy. How could I regret the best decision I ever made? She kissed him then, pouring everything she felt into it. Love, gratitude, desire, promise. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he laughed softly. Come, Your Grace. Let's leave Margaret with her nurse and go have a proper reunion. Scandalous, she murmured, but let him lead her toward their chambers. You love scandal. Only with you. Years passed, filled with love and laughter and purpose. 2 more children joined Margaret, a son named Henry, who had Penelope's quick mind, and another daughter, Charlotte, who had Sebastian's stubborn determination. Thornfield Estate became known as a place of warmth and intellectual rigor, where guests were as likely to debate philosophy as to dance. Penelope's school grew into an institution, educating dozens of girls who might otherwise have had no opportunities. She published essays on women's education under her own name, scandalizing some but inspiring many. Sebastian stood behind every endeavor, proud of his brilliant wife. They saw Edmund occasionally. He'd remarried, a widow with whom he was genuinely happy. Beatrice and Cordelia had eventually married, but not well, and they avoided family gatherings where they might encounter Penelope's success. Aunt Constance had passed away 5 years after the wedding, and Uncle Henry had moved to Bath. The Ashworth estate had been sold, its glory days over. But Penelope rarely thought about those difficult days anymore. Sometimes, late at night when she and Sebastian sat together in the library, still their favorite room, she'd remember the scared girl who'd arrived in rags, certain she had no value, and she'd marvel at how wrong she'd been. "What are you smiling about?" Sebastian asked one evening, looking up from his book. "Just remembering." She crossed to sit beside him on the sofa, tucking herself under his arm. "That first day in the library, when you asked about Mill. Best day of my life." He kissed her hair. "Until the next day with you, and the day after that, and every day since. You're sentimental. I'm in love." He tilted her face up to his. "After all these years, I'm still madly in love with my Duchess." "Your choice," she murmured, remembering that horrible, wonderful day when he'd spoken those words in front of everyone, claiming her as his. "My best choice." He kissed her deeply, and she tasted forever in it. "My only choice. Then, now, always." Outside, rain began to fall, but inside Thornfield Estate, Penelope Wickliffe, Duchess of Thornfield, once the poor relation in rags, was wrapped in the arms of the man who'd seen her worth when no one else had, who'd chosen her not despite her lack of fortune, but because of everything she was, who'd proven that sometimes, in the most unlikely circumstances, love didn't just conquer all, it transformed everything. And as Sebastian carried her upstairs, both of them laughing like the young lovers they'd been and the devoted partners they'd become, Penelope thought that maybe fairy tales were real after all. Not the ones with magic and impossibility, but the ones where 2 people chose each other every single day, building something beautiful from courage and hope and fierce, enduring love. The end.